I want you to get together.
So I feel like it might be a good idea for me, while I've got you here in the middle of the week, to kind of dive into what I'm known for, so people can kind of get an idea of who I am and what it is I do and why I even talk about these things. And primarily, I'm the author of the book, The Nephilim Looked Like Clowns. I'm the original creator of the series, which I started in 2016. You can watch that on my channel. The full playlist is there, and it dates back that far, almost 9 years now. And it's kind of developed and grown over that time to be like a holistic theory, which has developed to get into this book. And the book is a scholarly work. It's got references galore. I think 386 references in the first volume alone, and I'm currently writing the second volume to kind of flesh out this insane sounding idea. Because trust me, I know what it sounds like. Like the Nephilim, the spirits today we call demons. The disembodied spirits of what used to be giants that walked on the earth in an ancient time, according to the biblical history narrative, which were hybrids between angel and human. And I postulate and hypothesize and hope to prove that when you mix a fiery flying seraphim serpent angel with a human, you get something that looks akin to a big, wide, grinning, bulging-eyed, fiery red-haired, pale white skin, multicolored pattern all over the body, clown-looking monster. And what I do primarily is an anthropological study more than anything, and I, as well as bringing the receipts and the history of where the clown costume came from, which is quite literally modelled after the demons of India, the Rakshasa specifically, and going further back into where we get Harlequin from the Commedia dell'arte movement that came out of Rome from the Middle Ages for 1,000 years as a kind of a process of developing stock characters. And the Wild Man of Europe was developed into Harlequin, which became the foil of the clown, both modelled after European and Indian demons. So historically speaking, I kind of prove that clowns have always been a representation of a demon. But then if you go and look at cultures all around the earth, which we're going to do today in this little presentation, you'll find that there are folk traditions which are quite ancient, that go very far back, some newer than others, but if you look at them, they always seem to involve dressing like demons. It's a very similar motif, and usually it's about a battle between good and evil being enacted by the village or the tribe of some kind, a way of warding off bad energies or bad spirits by dressing like them in an apotropaic sense. That's what that means. And then in other cases, they dress like them to channel them in order to get stuff from them and make contracts and deals with demons. And my channel about understanding conspiracy kind of delves a lot into the spiritual warfare aspect of things and just how the mechanics of the spiritual realm and demons interacting with humans works. And I think my study and my work kind of gives a big insight into that world and perhaps the ignorance some tribes have when dealing with these things, and in many cases the absolute knowledge and understanding that we are making deals with demons when we do this. It goes both ways with varying aesthetical differences. So my work kind of examines these cultures, and you find the costumes they wear in order to channel spirits, which I contend are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, are clown-like, very clownish in nature. And it all kind of harkens back to this overarching theorem and point that the Nephilim did indeed look like clowns. And like I said, I'm working on volume 2, and what I'm going to kind of share with you today is what I've been working on over the past week. I've been writing a section on South America, and I've only just kind of dived into the South American continent after spending a couple of months fleshing out the North American continent and all the tribes in those regions and the way they channel their spirits and the many reasons why they do it and the differences between different tribes and the what would you call it, kind of the intentions of each tribe. We go into sacred clowning as well, and we kind of go into rock art and depictions of things within there which have clownish features, jester-like features too. And it took a while to explore the northern continent, but I've just moved into the southern continent after going through the Aztec and Maya culture, working my way through that, through Ecuador and down. And I've kind of gone into the Inca culture just over the past 2 weeks. And kind of going into this and just kind of having a brushed overview, I find that in the modern day, there's a lot of festivals that go on around this region, which kind of harken back to their understanding of a demon, which, again, we will get into. So that's what's coming in it soon, and I'll kind of show you some images and some work, and you've obviously seen the thumbnail, which kind of gives away this idea a bit more and the type of visages we're talking about here, and how this links back to my work. So again, I think this is a good episode just as like an introductory idea or concept to the thousands of hours of video footage and images I've collected over the years, and works and writings based on this theorem, if you haven't heard of it before. And I think all of this completely corroborates and backs up the biblical narrative, especially that found in the Book of Enoch, which is why I want to do this, because fundamentally I want to try and bring my audience to Christ. That's always the first and foremost meaning behind my work. And this is just one of many ideas discussed on this channel. And I think it could be a good idea today to just kind of go into it again. As like a refresher for maybe the old school people who have been with me for like over 9 years doing this. And again, for those new people who have just turned up and are wondering, what the hell is this? What is this guy talking about, Question, do you think that all Nephilim look like clowns, or do you think there are other types that looked like animals mostly, or some other type? I'd be interested in your thoughts. I think primarily the original Nephilim, the OG ones, did look like a serpent-human hybrid, which naturally creates clownish features when you start looking at the examples, which I can go through today. I'm going to go through all my catalogue of images to show you the artistic representations we have of these things all throughout ancient cultures everywhere. Not AI stuff. This is like rock carvings, ancient manuscripts, masks worn in rituals, and costumes worn during rituals, and all these type of things that represent them. And you'll see there's a common thread throughout all of it. The aesthetics will start to repeat themselves because you'll realize they're all dressing like the same things. And these are the ones where the clown gets its inspiration, I would say. But I do think there were other creatures that were around other than the Nephilim. I think there was the offspring of the Nephilim, the Nephil. Then there was the grandchildren of the Nephilim going down generations, which got smaller and more humanized in their looks as time went on. More variations, genetics started to come into play. And I think, we started getting some really creepy looking things that perhaps didn't look like clowns, but looked like something else. But I do think there was a time where humans also manipulated their own DNA. It's discussed as the mixing of kinds in the Book of Jasher. And in the Book of Jasher, it kind of explains how just in the lead up before the flood, about a 250-year period roughly before the flood came, the OG Nephilim were dead, and they were killed and wiped out as a punishment for the angels who made them. They had to watch their children kill each other, the Nephilim kill each other. I still think the children's children, the grandchildren, the Nephil, the Elio, and the Eliud were kind of still around, which were the descendants of the original Nephilim. And I think they taught mankind how to genetically engineer themselves. And then the mixing of kinds happened. So you got animals mixed with animals, humans mixed with animals, and loads of chimerid hybrids started to appear. And I think these in their own right could be counted as like a subclass of demon today. And there's something to be said for the idea that maybe when they died, their spirits were stuck on Earth just like the Nephilim, therefore became a part of the demonic horde, in a sense. So there is variation, definitely. And I guess I am talking about a very specific class of demon, those which are the disembodied spirits of half angel, half human. Not diluted, quarter angel, 3/4 human over generational dilution, the original ones. I'd say they would look more like clowns than anything. I hope that answers your question there. There's a lot of nuance to this theory. There's a lot of things to, the title does not explain it clearly. I know that. It's a hook to get you intrigued, but when you actually get into it, this goes deep, very deep, way deeper than I initially thought it would when I started uncovering this stuff. And those chimeras made maybe what we call cryptids today, says outtuition. Yes, that's my theory. I think things like Spider-Man, is a good example. I think, when you get these superheroes in movies as well, I think they're hearkening back to the chimerid hybrid humans. Batman, Spider-Man, Wolverine, this type of stuff. They are X-Men. Mutants. They used to be men. They are X-Men. No longer men anymore. They've crossed themselves out from the Book of Life, I assume, by taking that corruption to the soul and body. So I think today's modern cryptid phenomena, Mothman, that kind of stuff, werewolves, there's many cryptids and hybrid weird looking creatures all over the place, all over the earth. And you get a map out of like cryptid sightings with pictures of what the cryptids look like all over the earth. They're everywhere. These creatures that are quite like human animal hybrids. I think they're a product of what happened with the mixing of kinds. Same for mermaids, centaurs, that, you know what I mean, half man, half bull, half man, half horse, harpies, half bird, half woman, that type of thing. And I've listed many stories as well in like my own book of like cultural myths surrounding these creatures, and you can see that really when you contextualize it through the book of Jasher explaining this mixing of kinds, it makes sense very quickly where these things actually came from. And there's a lot of like mythologization of the situation. There's a lot of like stories from certain regions which have like mystified them, but when you actually get down to brass tacks, they were likely just lying to people about where they came from. And we can actually know logistically how they were created and why they were created through the biblical narrative. So I think that context is something people need to hear that they don't hear enough of. And my work, in a way, kind of can help contextualize biblical history in a way I don't think most people understand biblical history to actually be. And in a way, look, the Bible's great, you know, and you don't need me to make it better. It's good enough as it stands. But I think there's a disconnect with the modern generation. I feel like they struggle to connect to the Bible and the historical narrative. And I feel like modern churches and Sunday schools really dull it down and make it boring for people to a point where they don't even want to know. And it's a shame that that's what they're doing, because when you actually examine the books that we have, and let's go to the 88 book canon, you know, rather than just the 66 that we have. But I think if you really get into the whole story and the bigger picture, you realize it's actually the greatest story on earth. It's incredible. And it's very profound, very deep, very, it's epic, you know. And I think we can get people excited about biblical history. And in a way, that's what the Nephilim Look Like Clowns is trying to do. And I think it's working. I've got some good reviews. People are telling me it's working, so I'm quite happy. Didn't some of the giants have long necks? Do you believe some Nephilim had blue or red skin? Yes, Matron Ravel, there's many variations of a snake. I'll say that much. You know, look at the snake kingdom out there, the genus of a snake. There's many colourful and nuanced differences between snakes. Some have rattles tails, some don't. Some have frills, some don't. You know, some have black and white checkered underbelly, some don't. Some have multicolored skin. Some are brown, some are red. There's a snake is a snake is a snake, but there's definitely variation in colour between species, and I think that was the same for the Nephilim too. Yeah. Why would they be half serpents though? Does that mean angels are full serpents? No, I contend that specifically the angels, which were the Watchers, the 200 angels that descended to Mount Hermon, the ones that were originally classed with watching over humanity as like servants before corrupting themselves and taking wives of the people they were supposed to be looking after. I think they were the seraphim specifically. I think they were the closest to God. The seraphim are the only ones who can get close to God on his throne because they can protect themselves with their 6 wings and get close enough to his glory without burning up. And they're the ones who sing holy, holy, holy around his thrones, if you look at the descriptions of this. And I think that the God's closest angelic confidants were the ones that were sent down to earth to watch over his creation, specifically the humans, the people, the men, the man he made, you know, the men, him, women he made. And I think if you look at history, you'll find that dragons are everywhere and are often synonymous on each continent with being the creator or the gods of the old world, or the ones that helped humanity from a cruel, evil, vindictive god in some way. If you look at like the Jade Emperor, for example, of China, and the 4 dragons who brought water to the people because the cruel god just wanted to let them suffer. It's that kind of thing. You find it's in these inversion stories where dragons are always involved and shown as the heroes. And they were godlike shapeshifters as well. They weren't just the dragons were the just main form. And I think those were the ones specifically that mixed with human women. I think they were the ones that were given a task and failed. And it's a testimony to that even those closest to God rebelled, you know. And it's kind of like just like us, just like humanity. And we were in the garden walking with God, and we thought it could get better. You know, we thought we knew better. And it's the same with those specific angels. And I think if you look at the biblical narrative, I kind of explained it all in the book. I think those were the ones that primarily mated with human women. There could be some things to be said. Maybe they're like insectoid type angels as well, or maybe kind of like fish-like angels in some way. You get sea serpents is a common one as well. Typhon, for example, from the Greek mythology. He was a sea dragon, a sea serpent, and his job was to watch over a specific region of the ocean. and he controlled storms as well. And I think angels were given tasks over the earth. I think they were told to stay in specific points of the earth and make it function, and they were a part of the functionality. They were the rain and the storms, and they were like code in the machine that God created. Every angel, I think, is a piece of code God created to have a function in the creation itself. So when a third of the angels rebelled and fell from heaven, the creation broke. It's like removing a bunch of cogs from a very complicated watch, and I think we don't understand just how psychedelic the rebellion of the angels truly was and the impact it had on creation and everything. Why we have such a need for a new creation at the end of time, and the new heaven and earth, because this one is utterly corrupt. And I think the seraphim played a huge role and were the ones that mixed themselves with humans, creating the human serpent hybrids, which are the Nephilim specifically. And I think that's where they get the clown-like features from: the wide smile, the big eyes, the large elongated features, necks and foreheads and high cheekbones and the rest of it, and the crazy patterned skin, which is synonymous with clown clothing, That's my own personal theory, and I think there's a lot of historical precedents for that outside of the Bible as well as within the Bible. If you look at all the cultures, it confirms dragons came down and mixed with human women. Even in Australia, the rainbow serpents carved and created the earth and the mountains, and it was through them having communion with the earth, which is, again, just a very clever way of saying coming down and having sex with human women. The serpents merged with the earth and created the Wanginas, which are serpent-human hybrids. If you look at them, if you've ever seen them, and they look just like clowns: white face, polka dot pattern skin, pom-poms that look like pom-poms down the chest, a huge red afro, everything, Even have a little neck frills like you see clowns wearing. I'm not even joking. I'll show you this as we go on today. But that, again, serpents mixing with the earth to create hybrids. It's always the same story everywhere, pretty much. Very little variation between them, to be honest. So that's why I think serpent, personally, Danielle. That's my explanation there. Right, so with that being said, let's get on this. Let's show it. So if you're new and I've managed to get you and you're hooked and you're interested, let me show you just kind of what I've been working on. So first of all, I'll just get the book so you can get a bit of a sneak peek of behind the scenes of Volume 2. And I'll just quickly share the screen with you guys. So this is the book. This is Volume 2. This is what I've been doing right now. I'll just zoom in a bit so you can get a better view. So not. There we go. Right, so this is Volume 2 of the book. This is what I've been doing. And I've been working on Section 3. So the first book is actually Sections 1 and 2. And then I'm into the clown aesthetics in folk traditions and artworks. And again, North American traditions, I've kind of gone through this and it's turned into like a 20,000 word like thesis in its own right, just going through all these subheadings of North America and the Mesoamerican gods. Where we kind of ended that one. And then I've moved on to Chapter 21, South American folk traditions and the Incan Empire. So I've kind of opened up briefly explaining the Incan Empire and getting into this. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to give you a reading of something I just wrote. I just finished writing this little paragraph over a couple of hours. Well, 2 sessions, it took like a couple of hours each when I can squeeze them in. And really this comes off the back of summarizing the Mesoamerican cultures of the Aztecs and the Mayans. So there's a lot here you haven't read before I get into this bit. So it might seem a bit summary in some way, like summarizing in many ways things that you would have read previously. But it's a sneak peek. It is what it is, So here we go. The Incan Empire, known officially as the Realm of the Four Parts, was the largest in pre-Columbian America. Its administrative, political, and military hub was in Cusco. The Inca civilization emerged from the Peruvian highlands in the early 13th century. Portuguese explorer Alexo Garcia, and the first European to arrive at the Incan Empire in 1524. Subsequently, in 1532, the Spanish began their conquest, completing the subjugation of the last Inca state by 1572. The Inca religion evolved from the beliefs of the early Andean civilizations and was significantly influenced by the Tiwanaku culture, which predates the Incan Empire and was dominant in the Lake Titicaca region. The more modern Inca iterations of the religion centered on celebrating nature and was closely tied to the environment, the sun, the moon, and the earth. They also maintained a class system, as seen in the Machu Picchu hike and the Inca citadel, which were reserved for the highest class of Incas. Material possessions and social status held significance in their culture. Most villages within the Incan Empire practiced a religion focused on their gods. Notable deities included Pachamama, meaning Mother Earth or the land, Viracocha, the creator of nature, and Inti, the sun god. They also worshipped multiple other gods associated with natural elements, such as water, rain, and wind. Capac Cocha was a sacred Inca ritual of human sacrifice performed during extraordinary events, such as natural disasters or the death of an emperor. The Incas thought that sacrificing pure individuals, such as children or prisoners of war, who had fewer ties to the material world, would enhance the ritual's power and appease the gods more effectively. The children of Lulelaco, there we go, are three well-preserved Inca mummies discovered in 1999 by John Reinhardt and his team near the summit of Lulelaco, a 6,793-meter-high stratovolcano on the Argentina-Chile border. These children were sacrificed during an Incan religious ceremony around 1500. During the ritual, they were drugged with coca and alcohol before being placed in a small chamber 1.5 meters underground. They were left to perish. Archaeologists regard them as some of the most well-preserved mummies in the world. This culture, which reached its peak around the same time as the northern continent's Aztec and Mayan cultures, maintained a similar polytheistic religion centered on sun and earth worship, with a particular penchant for human sacrifice. Most websites and authors' descriptions of this culture are rose-tinted at best, as they romanticize a culture that based its trading standards on reciprocity rather than money, and lived in balance with nature. You find they often forgive the murder of children as a sacred ritual of the highest honor for the brutally sacrificed. Concerning this book's subject matter, what can be said of the aesthetics of the gods these sacrifices were tailored for? We can find very telling imagery that made my eyebrows raise as soon as I stumbled across it in my research. While examining the original metal plates, sculptures, and carvings of the pantheons of the Inca, we find that the face of the sun god Inti, who is the son of Viracocha, the creator of the universe, bears a resemblance to the Gorgons of Greece, the Rakshasa of India, or even the Oni of Japan. So let's stop there and let's look into this so you guys can see what I'm looking at. So the sun god Inti, sun god. So this is the Incan sun god, the son of the creator of the universe. So this is like a Jesus parallel, I suppose. Obviously, I don't think this is Jesus, or I don't think Jesus stole from this either. I think this was Nephilim being birthed by false gods posing as creators. So the fallen angels, the watchers, creating their own hybrid offspring. And if you look at a representation of the sun god Inti, like on this plate, and I'm sure you guys can get a good view here, it's got this buck-toothed, wide-grinned, wide-eyed, circle-nosed visage to it radiating out from the sides. And if you actually look into this here, is like a more of a explanation for it. And there's many versions of this plate. It's even like engraved into stone in many ways. But what you're looking at here are actually very common motifs we see all over the earth when we see the Nephilim represented. This buck-toothed effect, this snarly-toothed effect, shall we say, is actually very similar to, let's say, the Gorgons, as I explained there, of Greece. Let's look at the Gorgons of Greece. And these are what the more ancient plates actually look like, not the more modern iterations we see here. If you look at the ancient artworks of a Gorgon, she looks like this. And again, I think that is very similar to what we just saw there with Inti, the sun god. It's practically the same image, in fact. Now, that should send red flags immediately, because these are separated by vast oceans and thousands of miles, and they all have different stories for where they came from. The Gorgons, for example, were the offspring of Echidna, a human-woman-serpent hybrid monster who had sex regularly with Typhon, the sea serpent god. Okay, as I mentioned earlier. Flying serpents, dragons mixing with human-women hybrids with snakes, are creating many, many monsters, including the three sisters or the three Gorgons, which had this visage specifically. As you can see, wide grin, buck tooth, pale white skin, big red lips, tongue sticking out. Very usual depictions of the Gorgon here. And I think that is the sun god Inti. It's the same thing. If you don't believe me, we can also see the same visage in the Rakshas of India. Here's the Sri Lankan take on the Rakshas of India. They call them the Rakshas. The India call them the Rakshasas, but they are serpent-human hybrids. Notice the snakes protruding out of the head, the big wide red lip, the snarly tooth grin, the tongue sticking out, similar to the Gorgons in many ways. And these are the aesthetical similarities you see across wherever a human-serpent hybrid is appearing. And I think Inti, the sun god of the Incas, is just another one of these. So here's the one of these Sani demons, which has a story we'll get into in a bit. Again, same visage, same image, which I think we do need to be aware of these aesthetical similarities when discussing all these cultures. And these are the threads I kind of weave throughout my work, which gets to this point. So if we carry on reading there, what other examples did I give? Viracocha resembles the Gorgons of Greece, Rakshas or even the Oni of Japan. Yeah, so again, the Japanese version of the Oni demons. They also have the same snarly tooth, wide-grinned visage going on. Because we're talking about the same creatures here. Even if we go to the demons of Bali, the Balinese demons, they have Rangda the demon queen, or obviously this one as well, the Bali Barong, which is the dragon, which fights their own children, the offspring, the demon queen here, the hybrids between the dragons and humans. And we're seeing these aesthetic similarities across cultures because they all experienced and saw the exact same creatures. And all these creatures positioned themselves as gods over the people. So the people worshipped them as gods, and these usually answered to their dragon parents, the pantheons of gods, which took over the regions in the sky, you know. So it was all kind of lies upon lies upon lies upon lies that people of the time believed. But when you actually contextualize it through the biblical narrative, you realize we can't trust any of the actual stories coming out of these cultures about what they thought these entities were. Viracocha, the god creator of the universe, you know, creating his son Inti, the sun god, which looks like a Rakshasa of India, you know, because they weren't. That was just simply a fallen angel watcher and their child posing as gods over the region, and that's what I would say. And look, this is not like an attack specifically on the indigenous people of South America. This happens on every culture and every continent all over the earth. I don't discriminate when it comes to dismantling people's belief systems. You know, I think a huge lie took place in the past, and this is one of those lies that followed into the modern day. So often going on here, say we often see wide eyes with glowing bright blue around the pupils, accompanied by a significant grimace with snarly bucked teeth and a patterned or multicolored face surrounded by a serpent-headed aura. These are quintessential Nephilim features and the very source of the original clown costume, created and modelled after this demonic imagery in 1799, as explained in Volume 1, Chapter 15. So again, if you don't know what I'm talking about there, I better show you. So if we go to the Thailand temple Rakshasa demons, you'll find these here on ordained over many of these temples, this specific iteration of a Rakshasa demon. So if you look at this image here, and then we look in a new tab at Joseph Grimaldi, the man who was dressed in the first clown costume as we know it today. And this clown costume was invented in 1799, and it was given to this actor, Joseph Grimaldi. And if you look at that or turn it upside down, they're even in the same position. That's where it was copied from. So it was modelled after the Rakshasas of India, specifically these Thailand temple ones, because the person who created it was a son of a Freemason called Charles Dibdin. and he was very well acquainted with Indian iconography. He travelled back and forth to India quite a lot, as discussed in his memoirs, and that's where we get the clown costume from, specifically. So that's what that reference was there, if you were wondering what I was saying in the book, but that's been fleshed out many times on my channel. Could it be that Viracocha was simply a fallen angel who had dominion over these particular peoples as a watcher, before taking a wife and birthing Inti, his Nephilim hybrid child, who bears all the markings of a human-serpent hybrid? The aesthetics of this offspring give weight to this theory. So let's look at Inti a little bit more, and let's look at Inti, sun god, different variations of this. So you also see this one as well, holding 2 snakes in his hand. This is quite a common one, and this is often associated with Viracocha as well. You get these golden plates, and I think they had a shape-shifting quality to them. I think sometimes they could look more human or more serpent-like in their visage. This is very Gorgon-esque, many snakes for hair, you know, that kind of idea. But I think they had electricity and an aura about them, a power about them, which was quite shocking and electrical in nature. And I think that's where the serpent for hair effect comes from. I think that's where we get that from. And yes, before anyone brings it up, I know all about Thunderbolt's project and the idea that these were just plasma phenomena seen in the sky that were interpreted or anthropomorphized into beings. I disagree with that theory wholeheartedly. I think these things were real, tangible, walking around entities that actually looked like this. And I'm not going to symbolically get rid of them just because of one theory out there, which I think is false. I think these things did look odd and scary and weird and psychedelic and interdimensional, and did have odd, strange auras about them when they were doing this. So I think there is a colorized version of the sun god there somewhere. I can't find it here. For example, you see Viracocha in the middle, but surrounding him are these examples of Inti the sun god holding electricity sparking out of his ears, which look like jester horns, which is quite interesting. Very odd. Very odd indeed. And here's a colorized version. So these things did have colorful patterns to them. They had very clownish features. Obviously with their own culturally specific aesthetical stylization. And you'll find across cultures the stylization varies a lot, but the common threads are there, such as the buck teeth, wide eyes, white pale face skin, synonymous with electricity or thunder in some way as well. And this is just the Incan flavour. So let's just keep going on here. And obviously sacrifices were often made to these gods as well as the god of the underworld, which we're going to get into now, which kind of fleshes out this culture a bit more. There are other, more obvious references to demons directly in the Inca pantheon, and that is the Supay. He plays a very similar role to the Aztec or Mayan underworld ruler. He was connected to the spirits of the dead and had a dual nature, being both protective and fearsome. The Inca regarded him as one of the most evil beings ever, who controlled many demons, and is a perfect analogue for the Christian devil. Indeed, with the arrival of the Spanish in the 16th century, this is precisely how this entity was described and portrayed. The chronicler and writer Garcilaso de la Vega, in the first part of the royal commentaries of the Incas, described the underworld known as Ucupacha as a place of pain and suffering. He also wrote that Ucupacha was the lowest earth where they said that the wicked were sent, and to describe it more clearly they give it another name, Supaipa Huasin. This word means house of the devil. The Inca themselves, however, didn't associate the realm as good or evil, but just as the lowest level of 3, in which the universal dimensions were layered and the spirits lived. Just like the Aztecs sacrificed to their underworld god, Mixlant... I can never pronounce this. Mixtlantecuhtli. I think that's how it's... Cuhtli. Mixtlantecuhtli. There we go. Mixtlantecuhtli. For good favour in death, so did the Incas to the Supay, holding rituals to honour Supay during funerals and other death-related ceremonies. Ancient Inca artwork does not directly depict the deity Supay, but instead reflects the cultural themes of the underworld through symbols such as serpents, jaguars, and skeletal motifs. Supe is often portrayed in later folk art and traditions, such as the Bolivian or Ecuadorian Diablada dance festivals, and Peruvian sacra folk dances, as a fearsome shape-shifting figure. The representations of these devils are extraordinarily vibrant and clown-like in their costumes. Rainbow-patterned outfits adorned in shimmering jewels and shiny chains are worn, with large and fearsome masks bearing the face of a colourfully wide-grinning and bulging-eyed beast. The Peruvian Cusco's sacra literally translates to mischievous in English. When one looks at the masks of... typo though. When one looks at the mask of the Diablada, they bear a striking resemblance to the Rakshasa masks of Sri Lanka, or the face of the Mahakola Senia demon of sickness, or the Balinese masks of Rangda, the demon queen. We'll examine these entities in more detail in later chapters. So let's look at these recent iterations that I was talking about there. And these are the Diablada masks of these festivals that happen in Bolivia and Ecuador. And if you look at these things, they are so psychedelic in nature, with the serpents on the head and everything. And multi-fractaled and multi-dimensioned you'll find as well if you look into these a bit more. They get really colourful and wild in many ways. They all come marching out in a line like this, and they've got this bulge-eyed, bug-eyed effect going on, as you can see here with the buck teeth and the wide, snarly smile. They got the dragons ordained all over the chest here as well. And the dragon is usually involved in the costume. These are human-dragon hybrids. This is what you're looking at, and these represent the demons of this culture, of this region. This is what they believe demons looked like. And this all goes back to that ancient Incan culture, kind of mixed and blended with Portuguese and Spanish influence. It's a very odd blend, and the European influence on these regions and the festivals and the concept of the demonic definitely influenced this, but with this very specific cultural interpretation of what a demon would look like. And as you can see, it's very similar to what we've already seen in these other cultures, like the Rakshasas of India. So this is the Sani demon that I mentioned earlier of disease. This is from Sri Lanka. And the story behind this is actually quite interesting, if we get it up here. It's believed that illnesses were brought on humans by demons, and these beliefs and rituals could have prehistoric roots. According to folklore, 18 demons who are depicted in the Sani Yakuma, so that's this image here, originated during the time of Buddha. The story goes that the king of Lishavis suspected his queen of committing adultery and had her killed. However, she gave birth when she was executed, and her child became the Kola Senia, who grew up feeding on his mother's corpse. The Kola Senia demon destroyed the city, seeking vengeance on his father, the king. He created 18 lumps of poison and charmed them, thereby turning them into demons who assisted him in his destruction of the city. They killed the king and continued to wreak havoc in the city, killing and eating thousands daily, until finally being tamed by the Buddha and agreed to stop harming humans. Anyway, this is what the thing looked like. This is the demon that came out of the pit after eating its mother and went around terrorizing and eating people with its horde of big buck-tooth smiling demons following it everywhere, okay? And the story there is that the queen of a king was pregnant and the king didn't believe it was his. Now, after looking at this thing, I think he had a good reason to believe it probably wasn't his, right? Is it more likely that a Watcher-class angel serpent god had sex with a queen of a specific region in order to legitimately heir his own progeny, a Nephilim child, who would have a legitimate right to rule over a specific region through birthright of being a part of a monarchy? And you find a lot of that was going on in the ancient past. I've talked about this a lot, but even in the Greek pantheon mythology, Zeus quite commonly posed as a king to have sex with the king's wife while he was away on business, shape-shifting into the king himself to impregnate her and produce hybrid offspring, and I think they targeted kingships in order to birth legitimate blood right heirs to the region to take over. it was a takeover attempt. It was a coup, over God's creation. And all the God-appointed kings of this ancient antediluvian age were being usurped and replaced by these monsters instead. And yeah, it's more than likely she did not have sex with the king and bore his child, if this is what came out of her and ate her and went around eating people and was a giant. I think the king may have been correct in many ways. But this is what you find. This visage pops up, and it's very, very, very similar to what we just saw there with the Diablada. It's the same entity with the bulging eyes, a bit more pronounced. The eyes are more bulgy, but you often find the Sani demon does have this these two eyes at the side, these two bulges. Can you see these circles on the left and right there? And in a way, I feel like what you see here is a hearkening to that visage. It's a very common motif, actually, when it comes to Rakshasa masks. If we look at Rakshasa masks here, again, two circles by the side, as you can see. It is always present in most of the time. Here's another version. And again, these are continents apart, guys. This is the Indic regions. This is Sri Lanka. This is nowhere near South America. This is a completely different, disparate religion with a very similar visage, because they all encountered the same things, and they all have their own specific regional ways of depicting them. And this is what their version was, as opposed to the Ecuadorian regions and the Peruvian regions and the Chilean regions. So as you can see, that these two circles by the side of the face, I think, is exactly what they're representing here in their versions. I think it's the same. I think it's just the stylized version of that particular visage. And if I can just zoom out here, maybe scroll down and see another version. There's lots of, they all take artistic license each year. There's troops that go around. He had his queen as well. The demon of the underworld had his own queen, which looked like this, which is quite typical. This is likely a siren, as explained in the Book of Enoch. You have women who slept with the angels became sirens. So these became the mothers of the Nephilim, and I think they were hybridized to birth monsters. They were genetically engineered and changed from human into something else. Hence, in the case of Echidna, which is half woman, half serpent, she had serpent legs. And I think she was hybridized in order to be able to birth many, many monsters, many Nephilim. And I think that was her role, her job. And here's another example. Let me look at these things. They're terrifying, but they have the similar motifs to the Rakshas. So you have these as well, Rakshasa masks of India. So we have Sri Lanka, go across to India. Similar visage, bulging eyes, buck tooth, you got the dragon masks. This is a very clown-like one I found, which is very unique. I thought it was interesting. But white skin, red motifs, just like clowns. Here's Rangda, the demon queen, similar visage. And you find the aesthetics cross-cultural. This is what you get. You get the same visage wherever you go, just with slight variations based on artistic skill, prevalent materials for that region, whatever they have, they'll use, and this is what you get. This is it. And this is what this Cyclops version here is very terrifying, isn't it? You got this as well, a classic Rakshasa mask. And this is where you get your clowns from. This is where they come from. This is what they're modeled after. This is where you get Joseph Grimaldi, as I mentioned earlier. This is where the costume for Hit This came from. The Thailand temples. This is the Rakshasas who guard the temple in Thailand. These tamed demons. That's where this comes from, and which is where the clown was inspired from, and their costume. It's the same entity, and they're all over the earth. The vision, the visage is everywhere, including, like I said, South America, as we just explored. These aesthetical similarities are a smoking gun, as far as I'm concerned, for a shared experience across all the earth in an ancient past with a very specific entity and their offspring. And their offspring looked like this. They looked terrifying. Absolutely. Men's hearts would fail them for fear to witness upon them. And is it any surprise they managed to subjugate the entire ancient world and God had to send a flood? You know what I mean? These things were giants and eating people as well. It's like somebody has taken my work here on Reddit. It's actually a Rakshasa. There you go. And this is from season 2, episode 2 of Supernatural. And they find out that this clown going around eating people from in a traveling circus is a Rakshasa demon of India, and this was made in like 2006 or something, way before my work. So they've been telling you in the media for ages what clowns are modeled after. It's not. It wasn't hidden. No one knew about it. Like no one mentioned it yet, and I've kind of pointed it out as an obvious fact. So if anyone ever tells you clowns, well, I dress like a clown because I don't mean to look like a demon. I just want to entertain people. It's kind of like, well, you have no idea what you're playing with. You're ignorant. I don't think your intention matters when it comes to this type of stuff. But yeah, there you go. So that's my diatribe. That's what I showed you there. That's a taste of, like I said, the similarities across cultures and where we get the clown image from and the demons they're modeled after. And here's Rangda, the demon queen. She's a terrifying one from Bali. And I found it interesting. Another connection I just made is Rangda's always shown with this big long tongue. Can you see this thing sticking out here? Here's another example of a long tongue as well. And it has this jerky, layered thing going on, as you can see. And I saw a depiction of the exact same thing from Incan artwork. So if I go here to Inti the Sun God, if I just type in Incan gods artwork, I'm sure there was an example I saw where they had a similar motif going on, which I thought was really interesting. Anyway, here's another Incan metallurgy. So let's get into this just to round this off. They loved gold. The Incans had clearly an abundance of gold and worked with it a lot. And here's an example of one of the headdresses that were worn to represent Inti the Sun God again. And he is quintessentially Gorgon-esque Nephilim. It's ridiculous how much he looks like a Gorgon, in fact. Let me find a decent picture here. Incan golden artwork. I'm sure it'll come up. Here we go. So here's a good example of it. Zoom in right there. Look at that visage in the middle. That is that is a Gorgon. That is a Gorgon. Hands down of Greece. It is the exact same creature. You cannot tell me that is not that. Okay. I don't know what to tell you. The earliest depictions of the Gorgons of Greece, the offspring of Typhon the sea serpent and Echidna the siren, just as the Book of Enoch talked about. Seraphim angels mixing with human women who corrupted themselves, created these creatures that look just like this. This is what the Nephilim looked like, and this is what's right in the Incan culture as well. Okay, they were everywhere, across continents, across cultures, and you can tell through aesthetical similarities what these things look like. Here's one on a pottery relief as well. And people don't realize this about the Gorgons. They just imagine Medusa with snakes for hair. But the earliest depictions are nothing like that. They're this. It's a winged giant holding a horse there. Can you see? So these things weren't small. They were giants with massive, wide, grinning, serpent-like features, buck fangs, with wings, with human bodies. Not serpent bodies. Okay? Because they were human beings mixed with angelic serpents, hence the wings, okay, to show their angelic nature and the serpentine hybrid features. This is what the Nephilim looked like, and that's exactly what the Incas dealt with too, from the looks of it. So ignore what they told you they thought these creatures were. Pay attention to the aesthetical similarities across cultures, and a different story appears, is what I'm saying here. Okay? Every culture has their own lie they believe about what these things are. But that's what they are. They're lies. Okay, these things lied to thousands of cultures about who they were and what their intentions were. Okay, and many cultures believe it. If you look at this jester-looking thing, look at these headdresses they wore to represent the three gods. You have Inti, the sun god. You've got the moon goddess as well, and the imagery doesn't seem to want to come up anymore. There it is. You got the moon goddess as well, which has a bat-like features, as you can see, with fangs. And then you've got this thing with dragons on each side. So it looks like jester horns from here, doesn't it, on the left? Can you see? But that's actually two dragon serpents coiled around the ears of the god itself. That's Viracocha, the dragon. Okay, that's Viracocha, the sun Inti, and the moon goddess on the right there. Yeah, these seem to me like just, it's quintessentially a Nephilim creation story. There's a good view of the dragons on the sides of the head of the god. Yeah. So dragons, gorgons, monsters, sun gods, whatever. It's all the same story all across continents. And that's my little presentation there, a little taste of what I do and what I've just been working on writing about recently. And there'll be much more to come. This is just the start of the book. I've got to go to Europe after South America, and that gets even wilder. That gets crazy over there, what's going on in Europe. So there we go, guys. A little presentation. I hope you enjoyed that. I've just gone to the hour mark.
In a world where 54% of Americans read below a 6th grade level.
Could you read this?
It's impossible. I just see his words everywhere.
One man wrote a book about the hidden truth behind clowns.
I finally finished it. Everything's going to be okay now. Links down below to the Amazon.
But he was about to find out.
Your primary market is the USA, and it ranks 36th in global literacy rates, with over 43 million adults unable to read or write.
Getting the truth to people is no day at the circus.
You know, sometimes I wonder if I'm the real clown.
Nobody reads anymore.
Have you considered recording an audiobook?
You're going to get a sore throat.
You're serious about this, aren't you?
You don't understand. I have to do this. The people have to know.
That book will ruin everything.
I will not use AI to record this.
We can't let him reach them.
This is just something I need to do. I don't even like clowns. The end.
Now they can hide that they're completely illiterate. This is amazing.
This season, playing on rectangular devices with black screens near you. The Nephilim looked like clowns. The audiobook.
I want you to get together.